What's going on, guys? Welcome back. Today we're talking about the 10 biggest criticisms of Bitcoin and trying to give you a little bit of context so that you can weed through what's true and what's not. And we're going to jump right into it and try to knock these out pretty quick. So let's get started. Number 1, Bitcoin is backed by nothing. Here's one that you'll probably hear the most, and it's Bitcoin is backed by nothing. It's just air. It's all just whatever the next person's going to pay for it.
If I buy Bitcoin, am I buying a share of stock? Or am I buying a pork belly? Or am I buying euros? What am I buying?
Are you buying air?
Oh, wow. Okay, you're going in. What is it?
I'm going in.
Yeah.
It's not like a stock that actually has a business behind it and has cash flows and generates profits. And from that perspective, you're right. It's not a stock. I've talked about this before. Bitcoin trades more like a commodity than a stock. Oil and wheat and gas and gold don't have cash flows either, but they still have value in the free market because people see value in the commodity. Bitcoin is no different. Anytime someone says that Bitcoin is backed by nothing and it's just air, it means that they don't understand the value proposition that it actually brings. And the value proposition of Bitcoin isn't that it's just going to be worth more in the future. The value proposition of Bitcoin is that it provides censorship-resistant global money. And if you live somewhere where that doesn't mean anything to you, then it's hard to get your arms around why anybody would care about Bitcoin. But if you live somewhere where economic conditions, government conditions aren't like they are in the US, the value proposition of Bitcoin goes way up. And so even though Bitcoin doesn't have cash flows, it has inherent properties that people find valuable. It's digital censorship resistant money that I can send all over the world. And Bitcoiners are simply betting on the fact that the way that our world is evolving, those inherent properties are going to be more valuable as time goes on. Number 2, Bitcoin is a Ponzi scheme. To be honest, I don't even get this one. I think people just happen to say things because they think it sounds good. This doesn't actually make any sense. If we just go straight to the definition of a Ponzi scheme, it's an investment fraud that pays existing investors with funds collected from new investors. Bitcoin has nobody that's running the show. It has nobody that is handling the money. I think when people say this, what they mean is that Bitcoin is an investment where the only way to recoup your investment is to sell the investment to someone for a higher price. But again, that is the same as every single other investment that you have. If you're buying commodities, if you're buying art, if you're buying anything with hopes of getting more money back, you're hoping it goes up in value so that someone else buys it for more than you paid. It just makes no sense when people say this. It's not a Ponzi. It doesn't even make sense when you look at what the definition of Ponzi is. Number 3. Governments can just ban Bitcoin whenever they want. So while it's technically true that governments can ban Bitcoin, what is not explained whenever people say this is what is the actual impact of that? Over the years, there's been many countries that have tried to ban Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies, and they can absolutely do that within their own jurisdiction. But the power of Bitcoin being a global decentralized network is that the only way to truly stop Bitcoin from running is to be able to turn off the internet across the whole world, which is improbable at best. So you have cases where countries have banned Bitcoin and then they've walked it back because it didn't really work out the way that they expected. And now they're trying to tax it and other things to, 1, probably discourage their citizens from using it, but 2, if they're gonna use it, trying to get some tax revenue out of it. Or like in the case of China, where they banned Bitcoin, which seemingly was an annual event. But when they went through with it in 2021, that Bitcoin hash power just moved to other countries in the world where it's not banned. Because of the nature of Bitcoin, this natural game theory plays out to where the countries of the world need to make decisions independently about if they want to allow Bitcoin or not. Even if a handful of countries, or let's say even half the countries in the world, ban Bitcoin, you still have the other half of the countries that may see it as an asset that gives them a political or economical advantage. But there is one caveat to this, right? Depending on what country comes out and bans Bitcoin, like let's say it was a country like the US. If the US came out and said, we're going to ban Bitcoin, it would obviously have a lot of negative impacts on Bitcoin's price. The market would definitely respond in a negative way, right? But even if there's a short-term impact in the price, the general properties and value proposition of Bitcoin is still there for everyone else in the world. Number 4. Bitcoin fails as a currency. It's slow, and it has high fees. The main issue I think with this criticism is people don't explain what their benchmark of success is for Bitcoin. Bitcoin has been an asset that in its relatively short lifetime has crushed the S&P 500 index in terms of investment gains. It's an asset that has shown over the years to be extremely valuable for people trying to flee situations where they need to be able to take money with them but can't take their national currency. So how big of an issue is it that Bitcoin isn't the best money to use when you're paying for your $5 Starbucks coffee? I don't know that that's the measure of success for Bitcoin, at least at this stage in its life cycle. It's just not there yet in terms of a high volume, low dollar amount transaction. Which brings me actually to the next one. Number 5, Bitcoin can't scale. A lot of people talk about scalability as Bitcoin's a failure as a currency because it can only do 7 transactions per second and all this nonsense. Look, again, this goes back to the same point that I just said. Bitcoin is 12 to 13 years in its life cycle. What it's provided up to this point is a global open source payment network that anybody can plug into and transfer value all across the world without permission from anybody. And that, quite frankly, has never existed before. Bitcoin being able to scale is not about the 7 transactions per second on that base layer of Bitcoin. It's about how you add other layers on top to be able to add that functionality. And people may say, well, that's weird, Visa just works. And what a lot of people don't understand is Visa itself is a second layer system on top of the other settlement layers like ACH. Let me just explain this real quickly. Anytime you swipe your card, the payment happens immediately. You get your coffee, you leave, everything's great. And then when you look at your credit card account, you notice that that pending transaction stays out there for a couple days before it actually posts. Well, that's because the money hasn't actually moved. So even though you have an instant transaction with your Visa card, the money is actually moving because of the ACH network. And you never hear people say, well, ACH is a failed payment rail because it's too slow. It's used for settlement. It's not used for buying something at the counter. And I think the vision for Bitcoin is the same. The base Bitcoin layer will be used to actually settle the money. But there are layers like Lightning being built on top of it that'll be used to do instant and free transactions. It may not be ready to replace Visa today. It may not be ready to replace Visa ever, but that doesn't mean it doesn't have value. Number 6, Bitcoin is only used by criminals. I think it's crazy that this is still one of the narratives that pops up. I think it's been debunked so many times. So number 1, if you look at the percentage of transactions, the percentage of value that has been estimated of illicit activity on Bitcoin, it's really small, especially when you compare it to the amount of dollars that have been laundered and are used in terms of illegal activity with the US dollar. It's not even close. So any potential benefit that Bitcoin provides in terms of anonymity, there's a balance between the historical transactions forever being linked and stored on the blockchain. In my opinion, it balances out the benefits with something that's just as big of a con. But the bottom line is the amount of illicit activity that's been estimated on Bitcoin is far less than the amount of activity that happens in the US dollar. So I don't know why we would assume that only criminals use Bitcoin. So far, we've gone through the first 6 of the 11 biggest criticisms of Bitcoin, and that's where we're going to stop for today. Stay tuned for part 2, where we'll finish up on the last 5. If you're ready for part 2 right now, go ahead and click the video on the end screen, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.